Hey Creagears, Robert here and welcome back to a brand new video. It's finally time for our first Splatoon 3 project after the official launch of the game. So for this project I wanted to do a kind of continuation of one of our very first Splatoon 3 projects. For this video I've made a Furry Octarian Plushie to complement our little buddy one. As with all of our plushie videos, I had to start with a pattern since there isn't anything like the Octarians that I can use for the patterns. So we started with a core of paper to save a heck of a lot of aluminium foil. Of course, the 3D model reference sheet right behind us for the shape and size. For this pattern I made the reference 25 centimeters tall and then I'm going to size it up 200% on my computer so I get another 50 centimeter tall plushie. So after a little bit of work with the paper and a bit of extra effort for the masking tape on some tougher pieces, I get the paper base that I can now cover with aluminium foil as the next step in the process of making the patterns. Next up was the task to cover at least half of the aluminium foil with masking tape. This way we make sure that the aluminium foil doesn't wrap or warp once we try to remove it from the paper base. So after I've got half of the body and the complete underside covered, I can mark out a few things before I can go and cut out all of the pieces. Making the seam line for where the skin is going to meet the fur and where the pieces are better off being 2 or more parts. Then with a little bit of flattening, we get the final pieces that I then scanned into my computer and made into the files to be able to mark onto the fabric pieces. For this I used another set of sphere patterns from templatemaker.nl. For these I'd sewn 4 of these pieces together. So after first using the machine to sew 1/2 of each of the pairs, I get to line up the 2 sets to make them into one eye. By using this technique to make 2 halved spheres, I get 2 nice white eyes for the plushie. Then these 2 halves were added to a 90 centimeter wide circle made from some purple fabric to make the edge around the Octarian's eyes. Having made sure to mark out a 60 centimeter wide circumference for the eyes themselves, and having added the stuffing, so I can make sure that I place them in the middle of the mask. Next up was the mouth. For this I traced the pattern onto another piece of purple fabric and used the sewing machine to line up the edge of the foot with the traced line. This way I can consider the thickness of the mouth without skimping on the size of the front of the mouth. I use this technique to sew around the mouth, but I leave a piece of the underside open. This way I can turn a piece inside out to hide the seam and to also be able to add the stuffing to this part. So with the stuffing added, I had to use a ladder stitch to close up this opening. And after that, I wanted to try and use the machine for the lips. But with the stuffing it was way too thick for the machine, so another round of hand stitching it was. Then it was the turn for the feet. For these I used the same feet around the circumference technique as I used for the mouth to get some more thickness for the feet. Although, unlike the mouth, both of these you can't completely sew shut. Because after cutting these out from the fabric, we cut a little hole in the back of the feet and we use this to turn them inside out and to also add the stuffing. But to seal these openings, we actually use one of the legs that are included with the patterns and use another ladder stitch to combine the two pieces into one. And then, to finish these two, we only have to use the sewing machine to give these flat shapes some toes. After the toes were added, we had the most important part of the plushie left to make, the main body. For this I started by first making the front. For this I had to make two sets of these big front pieces and sew these together. First along the front, since we had already pinned these together during cutting. And afterwards we pinned the two together to make it into one. After this was assembled, I could then go and add almost all of the loose parts to this. Starting with the eyes, which I could sew onto the face using the purple edge of the pieces. After this, I pin down and then hand sewn the mouth onto the front of the face. This takes a little bit more effort, but this kind of attachment would almost be impossible with a sewing machine. And luckily it's not that hard. And finally, after also having cut out the bottom piece, I could then sew the legs onto the bottom to have all of our loose parts sewn to a main piece. Yeah, after that I had one more set of parts to make. And also the most annoying ones, the suction cups. For these I had started with the suction cup parts from our patterns. These I then traced once over completely, and then I'd also traced only the middle parts. This gave me two sets of pieces, a top and a bottom. For the top with the outline, I could then cut and fold the hole open, after which I could then add the bottom to this part. and pinned the two together to get this 3-dimensional suction cup. And this I then repeat for the 4 biggest ones. And finally, the 5th suction cup was just a bit too small to do this reliably, so I had to resort to using some dark brown yarn to give the impression of depth. And finally, I had to start to cut out the fur pieces, both the 2 back halves and 3 50mm wide strips. But that was just something we had to track through to finish this project. So first up was to cut these 50mm wide strips to size so that we can sew them to the suction cups. For this I first had to pin the fur around the perimeter of the suction cups to get the length of the strip that we needed. Then I could take this strip and sew it into a circle. Then I could pin this circle again to the peach fabric and sew the 2 parts together underneath the machine. Because I chose to cheap out and get the cheapest fur that I can find, and I paid for that. The underlying fabric used to hold the fur was so thin and stretchy and slippery that it was so annoying to work with. Not even speaking yet over all of the hairs that it left everywhere and the general difficulty that comes with holding the hairs in place while you sew. But we made it work. Even getting the 2 big pieces of the back sewn together was accomplished in the end. But the toughest part, sewing the suction cups to the back, was still to come. For this, I first had to use the pattern pieces for each suction cup to mark and cut out the space for the piece. Then, with a lot of effort and some compressed air, I was able to make sure that most of the hairs faced inwards, and after which I could then pin and sew the multiple pieces together. Luckily, attaching the face to the back and finally sewing the underside to the rest of the body was a lot less tedious. Thank the great Savage for the fleece that gave a lot more support to the fur. Thanks to this, we were able to sew all of the pieces together while leaving a little opening between the face and the underside. Again, a way to turn the plushie inside out. Making sure to get enough into the tentacle first, since that will be the tougher spot to get to later on. And then we can just go loose with the rest of the stuffing. And so once enough stuffing is added, we use one more ladder stitch to close this seam, while making sure to let the edge of the fabric face inwards like it does with a normal seam. Then I also added some stitches to the top of the tentacle, just to make sure that it stays in this pose. And then we got one more job, the furry eyes. So we first make a mask from some leftover cardboards. Then we can use the airbrush to add all of the different colors to the eyes, including blue, purple, orange, tan, and finally a hot pink. This way we can get all of the colors of the eyes without having to add like 10 different pieces just for one eyeball. And so we finally only have to add the green irises to the eyes. With a little 30 cm white circle with a 10 mm white inner circle. Hand stitch to these colorful bulbs. And with that, we can officially announce the Furry Octarian Plushie finished! Hey Creagears, Robert here, and we hope you enjoyed this project. Hopefully you also think the little Furry Octarian is just as cute as we did. Also, if you also want to make one, or even an original Octarian with the addition of some shoes, you can use our patterns linked in the description below to go and also make your own Octarian plushie. But with that, we gotta go and continue with our next project, now that the sewing machine is still oiled up and ready to go for our next project. So, keep those creative gears turning, and we will see you guys in our next video.